Okay, here we are this afternoon in Central Lending Library, and I've got with me today Steph Mantle, who's at Central Lending Library doing her work experience in the library and with Citizens Eye Community News Agency. And she's here today talking to Lydia Towsey of the Lyric Lounge.
Okay, so how was the idea of the Lyric Lounge in Leicester? How did it come about and why was it suggested?
Oh, it's a very long answer. It's a question I'm asked quite a lot. In about 2008, autumn 2008, an organisation called Arts Reach came into the region, having acquired, I think it was something in the region of £100,000 to deliver a touring site-specific festival across 3 years, across several, 5 different locations to be identified. And the festival was to be a festival of poetry and live literature and spoken word. They knew it was going to be called the Lyric Lounge because they wanted to name it after the Poetry Lounge at the South Bank in Leicester, where they had a poetry lounge at the South Bank. It was going to be called Lyric Lounge because they had a consultation with some young people, and the young people said that the word poetry was boring and lyrics was more interesting. So Lyric Lounge. So they knew it was going to be called that. They knew they wanted it to tour and be this big, exciting poetry festival. And they knew they had the money, but what they needed was someone to deliver it and give it a shape and say what exactly it was going to be. So they came into the region and they talked to Writing East Midlands, which is regularly funded now by the Arts Council. And they asked him, will you take this money and will you find someone to do something with it? So Writing East Midlands said yes. And they put the money, they put an advert out to tender, they put the job out to tender, and they asked for people to come forward with a plan. And so Word, an organisation that I'm involved with, came forward in partnership with another organisation called Two Funky Arts. You see how this gets a bit complicated, yes. And Two Funky Arts, they're a music shop on Belgrave Gate, I think it is, on the road that Iceland's on in Leicester, up from the clock tower. And they sell urban music, R&B and hip-hop and that kind of thing. And they have a community arts wing to what they do called Two Funky Arts. So Two Funky Arts came forward with us and they said they would produce the project. And Word came forward. Word is the longest running poetry and spoken word night in the East Midlands that I chair and coordinate. And we came forward and said, well we'll programme it. We'll tell you what it'll be. And I was to artistically direct it if we got the money. And we did. And so starting from 2009, January 2009, we started to piece it together. So that's kind of how it formed and how it came about. Does that answer the question? Do you want me to say more about
Yeah, that's fine.
It's a long answer, really. It's like I can think of a day, really.
How do you think Leicester will benefit from the Lyric Lounge weekend?
Well, Leicester's already benefited quite a lot from the Lyric Lounge as it happened last year. Because last year it was, essentially then what happened, we came up with a festival that was 7 days and 7 nights long. And it happened at the Y Theatre in Leicester. And it was 10 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, every night. So you could have camped there, It wasn't really a camping type of festival, but you could have done. And Leicester's benefited because the audiences for literature, which were already large in Leicester, have substantially increased. So Word, the regular poetry night, we've seen a rise by, say, a quarter to a third of our audience. We have now got a resident filmmaker to support our night that we didn't have before, because the Lyric Lounge employed a resident filmmaker, paid him to do that, and he loved what he did, and he loved the experience in the community so much that he now volunteers his services for nothing. And other people have become attracted to the regularly ongoing sustainable stuff through their involvement in the Lyric Lounge. This year I think that will deepen, and that's a good thing. So the 3-day festival, it's 3 days this year, because we've got a broader legacy programme across the year of other things, monthly workshops for Word, and a big show called Showcase Live, which is a cast of young, culturally diverse men talking about the pressures of growing up in the 21st century. All that's happening across the year. But the festival itself will again do a real charm offensive for poetry and literature and the power of the arts to bring people together and transform lives. And we'll see increased audiences. And I was just thinking this morning, to be honest, because we had Word last night at the Y Theatre, and I was just looking at some of the people performing and thinking, all these people, none of them were performing at Word, none of them were involved in the broader literature community, in the broader arts community, before the Lyric Lounge. They weren't coming in, they weren't doing workshops in the library. That I know that Alison, the book doctor, hadn't seen them before. I hadn't seen them before. Now here they all were. And I thought, no, this is really exciting. Who am I going to be looking at this time next year, after this festival, who I don't know anything about right now? Who's going to be brought into that community and able to have increased their skills and creativity, have reached out to others, made friends, but increased their confidence and self-esteem? It's really, I think that's what a festival like the Lyric Lounge and what this festival this year will do. It will really help people grow in ways I think it's very difficult to predict, but we know that it will happen.
Did you expect it to be as successful last year as it was?
No. I mean, I'm a careful person, and so I think it would have been very dangerous for me to have said, this is going to be amazing. 7 days, 7 nights, every night we're going to have 200 people in the theatre, there's going to be hundreds of people in the day coming, it's going to be amazing. We'd never done anything like this before. My expectations were very low. It's a little bit like that film with Kevin Costner, and if we build it, will they come? What is it called? With a cricket pitch, not a cricket pitch. You remember the phrase?
Yeah, I remember.
If we build
Field of
this,
Dreams.
That's the one. You see, everyone knows things, don't they? Thank you very much over there, Simon. If we build it, will they come? And I kind of thought that. I thought, well, will they? And it was very nerve-wracking. And they did, but the numbers vastly outstripped anyone's expectations. And every night we had 200 people in the theatre, and they were a different 200 people each night, because we constructed the evening shows, 7 big shows, around different communities. So we'd have a sequence of workshops culminating in a show, and the workshops would be attended by young black men with mental health problems. So that audience that evening would be made up of their families and friends, but also people interested in mental health issues, NHS professionals and other health and voluntary sector professionals. Then another night we'd have a commission night where we'd put out a tender for people to write about museum objects. And so there were 7 performers who were writing about literally high quality pieces about museum objects. And that audience, which is not the same, the NHS, not so interested perhaps, so a different 200 people every night. And at any one point we had 50 people, 60 people milling around in this tiny bar area, and a different 50 and a different 60. I couldn't have imagined, no.